where we don't do news, we just talk entertainment. Share and subscribe.
Hey guys, welcome to Entertainment Talk Nation. This is Rob. This video, we're going to talk some more Godzilla 2019 and Godzilla vs. King Kong, the Kaiju universe that Legendary is developing over the course of the next 5 or 6 years. And, you know, I went through the last week's video because, you know, every week we're going to do the Q&A answers and then you guys can drop more questions in this video. But this one's going to be more general. I'm not going to go through the comment section because a lot of the questions were very similar, only with different topics related to different monsters. And the general question, general theme that's very consistent seems to be, will there be other kaiju or could we possibly see so-and-so monster? For example, some people want to know if we see Biollante, some people want to know if we see Mechagodzilla, so on and so forth. And I know this question comes up a lot. I know I answer it quite a bit because a lot of people, these are monsters that they like to see. These are their personal favorites. Everybody has their personal favorite monster outside of Godzilla in the Toho universe of monsters. And, you know, there's always questions related to them, whether will we see them? How do you think it would look? Do you think it would work? Blah, 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 blah. So we're going to just kind of do a general video answering these questions from different perspectives, using different monsters as examples, and not all of them because that would take like a couple hours, but some of the more popular questions regarding monsters. For example, Biollante and Mechagodzilla come up a lot. And I did a video regarding Mechagodzilla in the Legendary Universe quite some time ago, and it's probably pretty far back in the list, so I'm not going to make you guys fish for it. I'm not going to fish for it. We're just going to discuss it again, and we'll also talk about Biollante and some other monsters in the universe. First thing I want to say in general is, as anything can happen. There could be surprises. There could be no surprises. What we know right now is Rodan, Mothra, Ghidorah, nothing more, nothing less. Are there potential for surprises? Of course. I think all these monsters that a lot of you guys would like to see or hope to see, I think some of them could work. I think most of them cannot. And I think that if there's any chance we see additional monsters from Toho in the Legendary Universe is completely dependent on the success of the upcoming movies. Because everything is an investment. Everything is money. You know, all right, so how do we do? You know, would it be worth it to put this monster in? Now, certain monsters that don't work, a lot of the Toho monsters unfortunately don't work. Even I think Rodan works perfectly fine because it's very similar to a pterodactyl. People will relate Rodan to a pterodactyl when you're talking about the general audience. I think Ghidorah is a perfect fit because even though he has 3 heads, there was some people in the comments like, oh, well, how can Ghidorah work? Yeah, 3-headed monster. Well, we've seen dragons in cinema. We've seen multiple heads on animals before in cinema. Not necessarily dragons, but in general, like if you remember Harry Potter, I think it was the Cerberus, the dog, had 2 heads. There was, I'm trying to remember which movie it was that had like well, I guess you could argue like something like Deep Rising. You know, the monster didn't have multiple heads per se, but had multiple like arms that were like heads. You know what I mean? So almost like a Hydra, you know. And then you take into consideration that there's always been TV shows and things like that that have had monsters with multiple heads. One very popular one for me growing up was if you're from the 80s and you grew up watching a show called Dungeons and Dragons, there's a very popular 5-headed dragon on that show called the Tiamat. If you play video games, okay, there's plenty of video games that have monsters with multiple heads. Dragon's Dogma had a Hydra in the game, okay. Dark Souls, I believe the first Dark Souls has a Hydra in the game, which is a monster with multiple heads. So it's not uncommon to see that in American culture in terms of entertainment, whether it's video games, whether it's movies. So the idea of Ghidorah, who's a 3-headed dragon, not only is not surprising for general audiences to see, but people love dragons. I mean, think about it. The Lord of the Rings, the one thing people were looking forward to, not Lord of the Rings, excuse me, the Hobbit trilogy. The one of the thing that people were looking forward to most was the second movie when they were going to introduce Smaug and things like that. So, you know, I think that that's fine. I think Ghidorah perfectly works and fits, and they'll find a way to incorporate that. Mothra is a little bit different because you're telling the audience that they're watching a flying moth, and this is where you got to get into the territory where you're treading dangerous waters because there's a chance that Mothra could be changed. You know what I mean? It's very doubtful because they've already announced the name, so if it's called Mothra, it's got to be a moth. But sometimes these, when America tries to incorporate something foreign or something from whether it's a comic or some other story, they tend to change, sometimes a lot. They tend to change whatever it is to suit the general audience. I don't think Legendary is going to do that with Mothra. I think they're going to try and sell it. That's why I say that's going to be the toughest one to sell of the three, because it's a giant moth. Like, that's kind of funny when you think about it. Not to us. Again, people always get pissed when I do this, but it's like I said before, and I'll keep repeating this until maybe somebody gets it. You got to think about these things from a general audience perspective, and the general audience are not traditionally kaiju fans. So even though Mothra for us is like any other monster, the idea of a giant moth to somebody in the general audience is comical, or could be comical. That's why they have to sell it in such a way that makes Mothra special. So yes, they might keep the God factor or the deity factor, or they just might make it so grotesque, whatever the case may be. Now, in terms of some of the more popular monsters, for example, Mechagodzilla. Now, Mechagodzilla, we'll talk about that briefly. I do not think Mechagodzilla will ever work in the Legendary series, simply because it doesn't make sense when you consider that these monsters are going to be on American soil primarily, or even if they're not, it's coming from an American source. It doesn't make sense for any military, even in Japan, if you're looking at this from a grounded perspective, which is what they're trying to do as far as we can tell. They might switch up on us, but assuming they're going to stick with the grounding theme, it does not make sense for any military to build a robot to compete with these monsters that is identical to them. Like, to build a robot that is shaped like Godzilla and looks like Godzilla doesn't make any sense. Basically, you're playing on Godzilla's turf, and the Godzilla's just going to win that battle. Not to mention the general audience. Once again, the money makers. We don't matter. We'll make 5% of whatever revenue this movie is going to make. The general audience has seen, or at least has knowledge of, Pacific Rim. So why would they have the military build monster robots when they can just build humanoid robots that can fight? You understand what we're getting at? So yes, it would be cool to see a legendary version of Mechagodzilla. Maybe they'll make a little side story where aliens come down and they have a replica Godzilla. They could, but the question is, how well would it work? It'd work for me. It'd work for you. Likely it's not going to work for the general audience, and the general audience is what matters. And that's the thing that people have to understand. The general audience matters. If Legendary knew they could make $500-600 million on a kaiju film that includes kaijus the way they were meant to be, like Mechagodzilla and Biollante and stuff like that, they would do it. If they knew that the fan base was big enough to make them the revenue, they'd do it. But they know that's not the case. The kaiju fan base is very small. It's widespread, but it's very small compared to the general audience, which is worldwide and in the masses. So that's why you're not going to see you'll probably won't see a legendary Mechagodzilla. If they did it, I'd be happily shocked, but I don't see it. Right now, I think it's best to accept the fact that it's Mothra, Rodan, Ghidorah, that's it. And if we do get more, consider it a cherry on top. And if I were to put other monsters from Toho into the Legendary Universe, let's say they wanted to do that, I think Anguirus is a monster you'd see. I think the Spiga is a monster you would see. The Kamacuras, the Praying Mantis, is a monster you'd see. Monsters that make logical sense for the general audience. You wouldn't see a Gabra, okay? You wouldn't see Biollante, unfortunately. As much as I do like Biollante, that's another tough sell, because you're trying, if they're going to follow the format, then it's a Rose becoming a giant monster. And I think Biollante makes more sense in the second form than the first. You could possibly sell her as an alien monster, but even then, that's possibly a tough one. They would have to change her origin, basically, is what I'm saying. I think if you took the final Biollante form, you cut out the Rose and you cut out the storyline behind the Rose and just make it some sort of plant monster, that's kind of like on Monster Island. It doesn't really move. It's not very mobile. Kind of like a giant Venus flytrap. Then I think you could get away with a Biollante. Mechagodzilla, unfortunately not. Titanosaurus is another possibility. It's very similar to Godzilla, not in look, but in the fact that it lives in the sea, can swim. So Titanosaurus is another monster that could possibly be sold. So we got Titanosaurus, Anguirus, second form of Biollante, cut the storyline. of Biollante and make a whole new origin. I know a lot of people won't like that, but that's the only way it's going to work. And then the insect monsters, Spiga, Kamacuras, Gorosaurus, possible, overgrown dinosaur, basically. So he could possibly work. Manda's another monster that might work well. They probably make it a little bit more snake-like. But that's not out of the realm of possibility, or they can just make it like a worm dragon, worm dragon before it gets its wings and it can't fly. That's actually what Manda reminded me of, was a worm dragon. So I think he could work. But these are monsters that could work. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see them. I'm betting that we're just going to get the 3, unless they hit a fucking home run. If they hit a home run and like crack $1 billion at the box office for like worldwide, then, but that's not going to happen. At least I don't think so. I mean, the first Godzilla did well. I think it generated enough interest to bring people back for the second one. Plus, now that it's known that Kong vs. Zilla is going to happen, that's more interest. So the interest is there. The awareness is there. Whether or not they make enough revenue to add in more monsters remains to be seen. And whether or not they're willing to go beyond the 3 that they have remains to be seen. I think they're going to keep it with these 3. I think they're going to keep their universe limited to 4 or 5 movies. I don't think we're going to get spin-off movies for these monsters. They're just not popular enough right now. If by some chance one of them hits a home run and becomes ultra popular, like let's say Ghidorah, then possibly. But even then, it's a stretch, because then who do you put Ghidorah up against if it's not Godzilla? Godzilla is the household name for this universe, and I don't see too many monster movies that don't include him. So we'll see. But that's it for this video, guys. If you have any more Q&A, like I said, leave them in the comment section. If they're all kind of general, different questions, then I'll tackle one at a time. But if the theme is very similar to last week's, where people are generally asking the same or similar questions, I'll just do one generic video kind of answering everybody's questions. So, but until then, this is Rob signing off for ETN, where we don't do news, we just talk entertainment. Take it easy.
Thank you for watching ETN. You can follow ETN on Facebook, Twitch, or Twitter, or join the Nation Facebook page. Don't forget to click that subscribe button on your way out. You're watching ETN, where we don't do news, we just talk entertainment. Share and subscribe.
Hey guys, welcome to Entertainment Talk Nation. This is Rob. This video, we're going to talk some more Godzilla 2019 and Godzilla vs. King Kong, the Kaiju universe that Legendary is developing over the course of the next 5 or 6 years. And, I went through the last week's video, because, every week we're going to do the Q&A answers, and then you guys can drop more questions in this video. But this one's going to be more general. I'm not going to go through the comment section, because a lot of the questions were very similar, only with different topics related to different monsters. And the general theme that's very consistent seems to be, will there be other Kaiju, or could we possibly see so-and-so monster? For example, some people want to know if we see Biollante, some people want to know if we see Mechagodzilla, so on and so forth. And I know this question comes up a lot. I know I answer it quite a bit, because a lot of people, these are monsters that they like to see. These are their personal favorites. Everybody has their personal favorite monster outside of Godzilla in the Toho universe of monsters. And, there's always questions related to them, whether will we see them? How do you think it would look? Do you think it would work? Blah, 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 blah. So we're going to just kind of do a general video answering these questions from different perspectives, using different monsters as examples, and not all of them, because that would take like a couple hours, but some of the more popular questions regarding monsters. For example, Biollante and Mechagodzilla come up a lot. And I did a video regarding Mechagodzilla in the Legendary Universe quite some time ago, and it's probably pretty far back in the list, so I'm not going to make you guys fish for it. I'm not going to fish for it. We're just going to discuss it again, and we'll also talk about Biollante and some other monsters in the universe. First